everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another episode of Where Is. If you are new to my channel, Where Is actually a series I started about a year ago now, and it's a series where I talk about different missing persons cases and try to raise awareness about the case. Today we are going to be talking about one of the most requested cases that I ever get, and definitely one of the most famous missing persons cases of all time, and that is the case of Johnny Gosch. Because today is actually Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and it's an extremely huge problem. It is a $150 billion industry. There are millions of people enslaved all over the world, people who don't think this happens everywhere. Like, you really need to learn more about this because it is absolutely something that affects everyone. And 1 in 4 of these people is a child. And with this series, we are also, of course, raising money for Thorn. I'm gonna go quickly over that. I'm going to include some more clips at the end about what Thorn is and what they do. And they fight against people who are exploiting children on the internet, so it's a really great organization to support. And this month, our design was designed by Ellie. She's a subscriber. Thank you, Ellie. Ellie's information will be linked below if you want to check out more of her work. But she did an awesome design. It comes in gray, white, and pink. Stay woke. It's a pretty lit design. And remember that 100% of the money raised goes to charity. I don't take a single dime of it. Let's begin. If you have Netflix, it's possible you may have seen a documentary called Who Took Johnny, or maybe seen another documentary about him. His case is very publicized and hugely complicated and intense. So in this video, I definitely will not be able to give you every single last bit of information. There's a lot of areas I'm just gonna have to skip over. And I really hope you guys do your own research because this goes deep. There's a lot of corruption, conspiracy in this missing persons case, and it is fascinating. Johnny's story has spawned thousands of theories, ideas. People are constantly coming up with new theories of what happened to him, where he could be now. It's very possible that he is still alive. In fact, his mom thinks he's still alive, and I think he definitely could be. And he was taken in 1982. So think about that. He has been gone over 35 years now. So most of my story from the night of the events that happened, because there's like an official report and it's just not accurate. So I went off of Johnny's mom's story, because Johnny's mom, and a mom of any child who's gone missing, normally has the facts the straightest, is the best person to go to for the real story. So I will have a bunch of sources below, and one of them will be her written recount of this whole thing. It's very, very long, but most of my information is coming directly from her. So today we're gonna be talking about the Gosches, and Johnny's mom, Noreen Gosch, is going to be very prominent in this story. So Noreen was married before she actually had Johnny to another man. And it's crazy. This woman is super tough. I have tons of respect for her, because her previous husband was actually diagnosed with cancer. And not only that, they got hit with a huge tornado. Noreen literally found her 2 children face down in the gravel after the tornado, and thank God they were still alive, but she went out to save them, and then her husband died like weeks after this tornado. So this woman was tough as nails. She got remarried, and then she had Johnny with a man named John Gosch. So she had 2 kids from her previous marriage, and then Johnny. So according to Noreen, the story really starts on September 3rd of 1982. Official reports and a lot of documentaries skip over this part completely, but the Gosches were at a high school football game. One of the older Gosch boys was playing in the game, and Johnny came to watch with his parents. While they were in the stands, Johnny said that he wanted to go get himself some popcorn. So they gave him some money and he went to go get popcorn, but he never came back. And they were really confused. So John Gosch went to go find him, and they found him kind of near the concession stand actually talking to a police officer. They were like having a full conversation. No one knows what they were talking about. John asked Johnny if he could stand towards like the edge of the football game, you know, where there's a fence, so that they could see him from the top of the bleachers and keep an eye on him if he didn't want to sit with them, which a lot of boys don't. So he said okay and did that, and for a while they were watching him, and then all of a sudden he was gone again. So John went to find him again, and this time Johnny was underneath the bleachers talking to a police officer again, under the bleachers, like in the dark. So creepy. So John brought Johnny back up to the bleachers to sit with them, and then as they were leaving the game, They were walking out of the stadium with a bunch of other people, and Johnny pointed to the police officer he was talking to and said, "He was really nice. I think I should be a policeman when I grow up." And what was really interesting is that Noreen thought this whole thing was weird. She thought it was strange behavior for a police officer to continue to seek out one specific kid and talk to him. So the next day, Saturday, normal day, Johnny actually went to the movies with one of his friends. That evening, it was actually a really nice dinner. Johnny's sister came into town from college with her boyfriend, and his older brother was also home, so everyone was home, which was kind of rare for them. And they had a nice dinner and they were all home, and Noreen refers to this as the Last Supper. She said everyone was having fun, joking, laughing. No one knew what was coming the next day. So before Johnny went to sleep that night, he asked his mom and dad if he could do his paper route by himself the following morning. Johnny did the paper route, and this was such a common job. It's really interesting. Papers are like not a thing anymore. Like, I guess I just haven't really realized it. It's been like this for a long time. It's like you don't see papers on everyone's driveways. I think some people still subscribe to it, but it's not nearly like what it was back then. It was a very common job for people to be newspaper boys. So normally John would do this paper route with Johnny since he was younger, but this morning he really wanted to do it by himself. And John actually said, "Yeah, that's fine, you can do that." But Noreen was like, "No, you need to go with your dad. I don't feel comfortable with you being outside alone." So Johnny went upstairs and went to bed, but then weirdly enough, he came back down and talked to Noreen for a second. He gave her a hug and he said, "Mom, I will always love you. You are the best." Then he smiled and went back upstairs, and that was the last moment before Johnny went missing that Noreen would see him. Now, what's really strange is a call came in at 1:30 a.m. and Noreen's husband John answered this call. When he answered the call, he said, "Yes, all right, yes, all right, okay," and then hung up. And when she asked him who it was, he said it was a wrong number. Now, this was really weird because they had been getting calls like this almost every Sunday morning for a few weeks. She didn't think much of it, went back to sleep. And then the next morning, she was awoken to tons of calls coming in from people saying, "Where's my newspaper?" So she got up and she figured that, you know, he may have overslept, he didn't go do his paper route. She was probably honestly mad at him. But when she went to his room, she realized he wasn't there and his wagon was gone. Now, I don't know why his dad didn't go with him. It's really odd. He also had their little dog tied to their wagon, so the dog was with him. So John said, "Hey, he's probably just running late. I'll go help him finish up the route and you can make breakfast and then we'll all go to the lake." They plans to go to a lake that day. So this is September 5th of 1982. Sadly, Johnny was not late on his paper route. He had gone missing. So John came back a little while later, and when he got back, he was completely frantic, came running in screaming, "Johnny is gone." His wagon was only 2 blocks from their house with the dog tied to it, filled with newspapers. So John quickly said, "Call the police, something has happened to him." They called the police, and they also had tons of people calling in about their newspaper because he was supposed to deliver it. John actually went and finished delivering the papers with a neighbor, and Noreen waited for the police. And get this, they waited 45 minutes for the police to show up, and they were only 10 blocks from the police station.
It took about 45 minutes before the police arrived.
The police department was only 10 blocks away.
So in the meantime, she started calling all of the other newspaper carrier boys and asking them if they saw Johnny. There were several paper boys for the area, and a couple boys had seen Johnny that morning.
John apparently left the residence sometime around 5:45 as a neighbor reported hearing a wagon being pulled through the back of his yard. Mike was picking up his morning papers and noticed a car stop and then back up to the point where John Gosch was walking, and appeared that John spoke briefly to the driver of the vehicle.
All of the other boys that had seen him that morning had seen a blue car pull up near Johnny and ask him for directions, and Johnny didn't answer. He actually just kept walking with his dog and the newspapers up to the stop sign. And I'll try to put in a graphic so that you guys can see this a little better.
Car left Johnny. Johnny proceeded to where the newspapers had been dropped.
The vehicle is described as a two-tone blue two-door Ford Fairmont.
That car came back. The man in there asked directions.
I think I told the police he looked like he was mad about something. He wasn't drunk, but he looked like he's been drinking a lot of caffeine, you know, that kind of thing.
The boys were folding up newspapers at the corner. Soon, an attorney, actually, his name was John Rossi, came to pick up newspapers for his children to deliver, and he also talked to the man in the blue car.
I was there that morning. Johnny was doing his wagon. Johnny's dog was there with him. There were 2 or 3 other carriers there doing the same. I was the only adult though. There happened to be a car on 42nd Street, and there was a guy in there, and he was talking to Johnny Gosch. Johnny said, "Hey, can you come over here and help this guy?" This car just swirled. He made a U-turn, took off. I thought it was kind of strange that he would do that.
So according to the other boys that was there, Johnny had a gut feeling that something was wrong, and he actually said, "This is weird, I'm scared, I'm going home." And he started to walk away. And as soon as he started doing this, the driver of the blue car suddenly backed up and drove away from the scene. The attorney, the other guy that was there, he left as well. And then the boys actually remember seeing the driver of the car flash his lights 3 times. And then one of the paper boys saw a man come out of 2 random houses, start to follow Johnny down the street, and then they disappeared out of sight.
The witness that was sitting on the corner saw a tall man come out from between 2 houses and follow my son.
Mike saw an individual step from the curb onto 42nd and travel towards John Gosch.
According to the paper boy who was, out of sight at this point, he could hear the dog growl, and that's all that he heard. And at this point, there were actually 2 other brothers that were doing the paper route coming up the same street, and they were kind of in the area of Johnny at this time, and they saw something pretty disturbing.
The next 2 people that see him are 2 juvenile newspaper carriers
They reported seeing Johnny slumped over in his wagon.
that say, "Hi, Johnny." He says hi. They proceeded to where the newspapers have been dropped.
And they were in a hurry because they were running late, and so they left. And then neighbors heard a car door slam.
At about this time, P.J. Smith reported hearing a car door, and upon sitting up in bed, he observed a silver and black Ford Fairmont start up from the area where John Gosch was last seen and made a left turn after rolling through the stop sign without stopping.
Car ran the stoplight there and it turned left.
Carriers, they get their newspapers, turn around and walk back by that same corner, and when they walk by, a wagon is there with newspapers, and no Johnny.
This car that he saw was actually described as a black Ford Fairmont. So there was multiple cars, multiple people probably involved in this abduction. So the police in this case were literally terrible. This might be the worst police work I have ever heard of or seen after doing so much research on these cases. I mean, this was just atrocious. The police had absolutely no interest in helping Johnny, and this was back before there was rules against police departments saying you have to wait a certain amount of time for us to do anything. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but that old rule, you have to wait 48 or 72 hours depending on the police station. There used to be a rule that you'd have to wait that long until they would actually start performing a search and everything, which is so stupid because if child goes missing, I mean, you need to do something right away. This all made no sense, and eventually the laws changed, but back then they were like, we can't help you for 72 hours. So Noreen had already collected all of these witness statements from these boys before the police even got there.
There was no crime scene. Nobody saw anything that to us was an explanation for the boy's disappearance. He just vanished.
And what was so annoying is that the police officer kept saying, "Are you sure your son didn't just run away?"
The cop looked at me and he said, well, has your son ever run away before?
Kid never ran away. That really upset us.
And they just thought, like all cops do, it's a runaway. A kid ran away. No, this kid didn't run away. Johnny was our paper boy. I knew him, knew his parents, been out to dinner with him. Johnny would not run away.
Obviously he didn't run away. Like, it makes no sense. He was clearly out on a paper route. He left the dog tied to a wagon, all the newspapers, and just disappeared. He did not run away. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. He's never run away before. That whole theory is just bullshit, obviously, but the police department was really set on, oh, he ran away. And that's what makes people think that there's almost some corruption in this case and that the police department may have been involved. You know, remember that creepy police officer? So the police officer was like, yeah, whatever, he ran away, and he left their house, and they didn't even hear from the police for 8 hours. Can you imagine if that was today? That would be unheard of. Later that day, 3:30 p.m., so keep in mind this was early in the morning that he went missing, they finally came back to their house. They asked for pictures of Johnny, asked a few questions, and left. So she actually called the parents of some of the witnesses, the other boys that saw Johnny that morning, and the police had come to their house as well to ask them questions, as they should have. And they reported that the police didn't even bring a piece of paper, anything to take notes with, no clipboard, nothing. It's like they were told not to try hard on this case. And what's even crazier is the police chief, his name was Orval Cooney. He said that they should stay home and not talk to any media and basically be quiet and hide.
It's somewhat of a frustrating investigation, but I'm very optimistic. I think that we will find the boy and he will be alive.
They told them not even to participate in the searches for Johnny. Makes no sense. The whole thing was so weird because Johnny always came in and woke his dad up to do the newspaper route. So this made no sense. Johnny purposely left without his dad. Like, and why did he want to go by himself suddenly? It just didn't make any sense. So Noreen and the public, the community really rallied, started forming searches and everything on their own. And not even kidding, at one of the searches, one of the police officers, who was drunk at the time, got up on a picnic bench and started screaming, "Go home, folks, this is just another runaway," like literally discouraging people from searching. There was a lot of corruption in this town. I'm not gonna get into a lot of that.
Told by government agencies, well, you have to prove that child's in danger. To us, he's a runaway until you prove he's in danger. You can almost become catatonic. You can almost go into a state of mind where you don't want to talk to anybody ever again. Not trust anybody ever again. That's our boy's life.
I mean, the police chief had just gotten in trouble for beating someone up at a bar. So there was so much corruption in the police department. Tons of the police officers had charges against them as well, and things that they should have been fired for and they weren't. So it was just a really corrupt police department and corrupt politics as well. And I'm not gonna get into all of that today, but it's very, very intriguing once you hear about it. And you guys should also look into the Larry E. King investigation, or the Franklin cover-up. Very interesting stuff, and it will kind of help you understand how this stuff happens on a large scale, because people just do not understand how corrupt and how systematic pedophilia rings exist in this country all over. And I'm not exaggerating, this is absolutely true.
Innocent children like these can become big money in the highly lucrative business of child pornography and prostitution. This is a catalog for pedophiles. There are ads like this. 45-year-old man seeks contact with others interested in adolescent and pre-adolescent boys and girls.
My heart went out to her as a parent because I knew she had a big fight on her hands.
Children need to know that they must be cautious with their actions.
This is not some BS conspiracy theory. This is real. This is absolutely real. And this is why I support Thorn so closely. You're probably really confused, so let me keep explaining. So Noreen really alarmed people. Noreen is a woman who's been through so much shit that she's just very tough and stoic and has a plan. She was very like action oriented she loved her son so much. And people really mistook her for being overly, not happy, but like not sad. People really gave her shit all over the country because she finally did a news, like a TV, the TV finally gave her some airtime to make a little plea to whoever had her son.
12-year-old John Gosch had been delivering papers in this affluent neighborhood of West Des Moines. That was the last time he was seen.
Let us know what you want as far as anything.
Johnny, we love you. We're waiting for you to come home. We're doing everything in our power to get you back. And we're leaving the porch light on every night. Moms are like that.
A lot of people thought she was too okay and was too put together. People started thinking she was crazy, and she was also really pushing all the time, because for years it went on where the police were barely helping. She would get a lead and they wouldn't do anything. So she had to become this person that was really pushy. She had to fight for herself, and some people ended up not liking her.
I think that our son was taken off the corner of 42nd and Marquardt. I don't believe for 1 minute that he ran away or walked voluntarily with anyone. He just wouldn't do that.
Day after day, police and volunteers searched for Johnny, but the days turned into weeks, months, and years.
Following this release that we made, the FBI referred to us as loons. That is a message to America that if you try to find your child, and if you work diligently at it, you may be referred to as loons by the FBI, who are doing nothing to help the parents.
It was very weird at the time how this all happened because, I mean, missing children wasn't as big of a thing then, although it was happening a lot. People just did not know about it. After she did that interview, people would drive by the house saying, I hope your son is dead somewhere, he's dead, you're never gonna find him. Like, all these awful things, all these nut jobs came out near their house. I mean, it was just a crazy, crazy time. Now, as time went on, they found literally nothing. There was no clues, there was no good leads or anything. August of 1984, another boy named Eugene went missing, Eugene Martin. He was also a paper boy and around the same age as Johnny. So she started thinking, this has got to be connected because it was in the same area of Iowa. Did I even mention this? Yes, this all takes place in Iowa. I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure I did not mention that.
You just feel completely lost. You know, you don't know what to do, where to go, who to talk to.
It's just like a movie being rerun, that we're watching the movie, except the actors are different.
Mr. Martin, did your son, Eugene, know about the Johnny Gosch case?
Yes, he's heard of it, and he's been aware of the story of Johnny Gosch and all.
Is it possible that the same person kidnapped both boys, or is that just a coincidence?
It's possible. At this point, they have not determined whether there is a link between the two cases yet, but there's a great many facts that are very striking.
Are you hopeful that the trail for Eugene Martin might lead to Johnny too?
Yes, we are.
In 1984, a milk company, a local dairy company, decided to put Eugene and Johnny on their milk carton. And this is how milk carton faces started, if you've heard of this. There's a lot of people that have been displayed on milk cartons all over the world for a long time now, missing children. So Noreen really wanted to do any type of good work she could to help Johnny's situation, but also prevent this from happening to other people. So she, with a couple of other parents of missing children, worked together and created the National Center for Exploited and Missing Children, or NCMEC. She also implemented the Johnny Gosch Bill, which requires law enforcement to act immediately when there's a missing child for any reason. So then in 1985, a dollar bill surfaced and it said, "I am alive, Johnny Gosch." Now to this day, we cannot confirm that this was actually Johnny that wrote on this, but it is definitely possible.
The lady called us one night about 9 o'clock at night, said that she had received this bill and change at a grocery store in Sioux City, Iowa. And I asked her, would you please send us the bill? I'll send you $1 back for it. That's what she did.
The signature is right.
It's also possible that someone saw his face on the milk carton, had been following the story, and just decided to be a prankster and put that out there. And then in 1986, another paperboy named Mark Allen also went missing from the Des Moines, Iowa area.
I'll never forget it as long as I live. The last thing he said to me as he walked out the door was, "Save me some pizza, Mom. I'll be hungry when I get home." And he waved when he got to the bushes, and I waved at him, and that was that, and I never saw him again.
And then in 1998, the Gosches received a letter that they believe was from Johnny. It was a typed letter that was postmarked Idaho, and the writer said he was Johnny and that he had been kidnapped, said that he had been forced to do terrible things. His kidnappers had dyed his hair and given him a new name, and at the end he signed the letter, "Your son, Johnny Gosch." Shocking and upsetting for Noreen, as you can imagine. And the biggest break in this case, 1991. A man named Paul Bonacci comes forward and confesses to have been in the car that took Johnny. He said that he was part of the group that kidnapped him. He helped and assisted in the kidnapping.
24-year-old Paul Bonacci, a victim of sexual abuse since the age of 6, is himself a convicted sex offender, has been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder.
He was in jail. He had been previously involved in the Franklin cover-up, so I will let you guys definitely do your own research on that, because that is a whole nother thing. This video will be way too long. This was a guy who, from a very young age, was put into sexual exploitation. He was a victim of a child prostitution ring in Nebraska, and he was actually in jail in Nebraska. Now, he suffered from really bad multiple personality disorder. Now, if you don't know much about DID or multiple personality disorder, it is insanely complicated and very interesting. Like, I don't think a lot of people quite understand it, but it's really like having multiple personalities. I was just visiting someone I know that was dating a guy that had multiple personality disorders, and oh my god, it was the craziest story I've ever heard. But that's not my story to tell. She described it as basically he was a driver of a bus, but there's all these other passengers on his bus, and any one of them at any time could start driving the bus, and that is who you see. So these people, they literally have different voices, different attitudes, and this is not just like some weird thing people do. It's a really real disorder that mainly starts when you have trauma in your childhood. Psychologists say that your personality is formed around 5 or 6 years old, that you are who you are at that point, and what happened to you in the early days of your childhood, it's going to impact you hugely in your future. So that's what happened to Paul. I mean, he was in a child prostitution ring from the moment he was basically aware of what was going on in life.
It is only through these personalities that he remembers the day he helped kidnap Johnny Gosch.
Every time he would put his head down and call up somebody, it seemed authentic. It seemed to me that he couldn't fake that. This guy probably wasn't capable of coming up with all these voices and all these different things to say.
Benassi can call forth his alter egos at will. First to emerge, Mark Anderson, 15 years old.
All I remember him talking about was that this was the boy that they were going to, one of the boys they were going to take.
Paul says a Des Moines accomplice snuck up from behind as the abduction was made. Benassi did his part, chloroforming Johnny.
I held him down for a second. I put this thing that Emilio told me to over his face, and a few seconds later he went out.
But he had these personalities where he would put his head down and then he would come up as someone else. Really bad multiple personality disorder, and that's why a lot of people have dismissed him and said he's not a credible witness and he could be making all this up, and he could be, but why? He got no reduction in his sentence or anything, and he actually met with Noreen Gosch.
When Paul Benassi first surfaced, I needed some time before I could go to the prison and sit down and meet with him. I could have strangled him, but I also knew that he had been forced to do it. He had been a victim also.
Fills out a consent form, not knowing who this woman is.
Mrs. Gosch wanted to talk to you.
Just tell me what happened, please.
I feel so bad about it because of what they made me do.
Benassi drew a map of the clan, a replica of one drawn by the kidnappers. Noreen Gosch says this X marks the exact spot of the abduction.
So he basically said that there's a man named Emilio, and this is where I'm just not going to be able to get into everything. It is a hugely complicated puzzle of multiple players here, multiple states, a giant pedophilia ring. People do not want to know that this is real, but it is absolutely very real. It happens in this country all of the time. The amount of people that are sex trafficked in this country is insane. I've said this before, but you guys should really watch this documentary called Jane Doe. It's on Netflix. It will be very eye-opening to you about just how easy this happens and how many people get stuck in this brutal world that goes on. And people just don't really want to face the reality that this does go up high in the government. It absolutely does. There's a lot of officials, and I don't know how far it goes, and I don't know how many politicians or, you know, government officials, mayors and stuff who have these powerful positions. I don't know how far they go into it or if they're even involved in actually doing things, but I think that they benefit monetarily, like they make money off of it. You know, that's a whole nother can of worms to get into. So I'm gonna leave more resources on that type of stuff below so you guys can do more research, because you should absolutely educate yourself about what's going on. They bound him, gagged him, and Paul, I guess, could be making this up, but I mean, it just, why? Why would he make this up? And he even recalled several things about Johnny that he just wouldn't have known. For instance, he had a burn on his tongue. He also knew about a scar on his leg and a stammer that he would get when he was nervous or upset. So Noreen believes Paul fully. She really thinks that he's telling the truth about his whole experience. Now, in 2013, actually, this Des Moines, Iowa pedophile ring was finally busted by the FBI. The FBI actually rescued 105 kids from child sex trafficking trade. So this is absolutely real. In 1992, America's Most Wanted decided to take the case, and America's Most Wanted has done excellent work. They have great resources and they really want to help people.
I know what it's like to search for your missing child. I know what it's like to not know what happened. And so I thought, let's go back and look. Maybe somebody will have the guts to finally tell us what happened to Johnny.
They actually met with Paul Bonacci since the police weren't at all interested in doing any type of investigation further into this. Every single piece of evidence that has ever come forward about this, the police have just dismissed. It's amazing. Like, it is so frustrating.
2 years ago, a convicted child molester surfaced and said he helped kidnap Johnny. Bonacci claims that an organized ring of pedophiles abducts children and forces them into a life of child pornography and prostitution.
We didn't know who we were going after, and we had a missing child who had been missing for 10 years. And the FBI was waving us off right from the very beginning, saying these are not credible witnesses, we don't believe this information is valid. So we went into it pretty skeptically, particularly when you have a character like Paul Bonacci, who was clearly suffering from multiple personality disorder, who had huge credibility issues, and who had been in prison.
So Paul was in this episode, and on TV, he took them to a place here in Colorado where I live, and he took them to this house. And in this house, this is where he said that they were all kept.
No. They kept us here, and I almost couldn't do it to even go near the house because I got up there and the memories flooded back of the last time I was here.
There was an underground dugout area with boys' initials carved in the wood. Now, police never looked further into this or anything. Nothing came out of it, but it's pretty shocking.
Are you familiar with the Johnny Gosch case? He was an Iowa paperboy who disappeared 30 years ago.
I am not personally familiar with that case.
But do you know about it?
We agreed that we were not talking about Johnny Gosch case at all.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know
there
that.
There will be no questions about Johnny.
Probably the most crazy part of this whole story is that in 1997, Noreen claims that Johnny Gosch came to her house.
There was a knock on my door, a persistent knocking. And I went to the door and I could see a young man standing out there. And I kept looking at his eyes. And the eyes don't change. And so I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "It's me, Mom, Johnny."
So for years, she actually kept this to herself. And there are people out there, critics, that think she's literally making it up, but why would she? She knew people weren't going to believe her anyway, so she didn't tell anyone. But she finally was in court testifying about something, and under oath was asked if she had ever seen him, and she said yes. So it finally came forward years later, but in 1997, he came to her house, dude.
Another young man with him, and Johnny did not introduce him. I said, "Let me call somebody to help." He immediately got very upset, and he said, "They'll kill me if they know I've been here." He shared some information about how they traffic the kids through the country, and that the kids were forced to do a lot of things that were illegal. So therefore, none of them would ever go to the police for help. And then in a very short time, it was over, and he said, "I have to go."
At that point, he was 36 years old. Then we're jumping a lot forward now to August of 2006. And I'm definitely skipping some things I want to talk about, but I just don't have time. So please do your own research on this. And I think I'm probably gonna do a whole podcast episode on this. But in 2006, Noreen received a bunch of photos of boys who were bound and gagged. Now, I just don't like to show this type of stuff in my videos because I don't know who those kids are. I don't know if it is Johnny, and I don't know if they would want more people to see them in that condition. So if you want to see the pictures, you can find them easily with a Google search. So I'm just not including them into this video because some people get very upset by that stuff, and I just find it to be pretty disrespectful. She did receive these photos, and they look a ton like Johnny. She is pretty damn sure it's Johnny. I'm pretty damn sure it's Johnny. He has now been missing, what, 35 years? I think that's about right. Around 35 years he's been gone, but they think he's still alive. Now, what's crazy is a lot of people have different theories about who he is now, and there's actually this theory that I thought had nothing to it when I first looked into it, but now that I know a little bit more about it, I think it actually could be possible. A lot of people think that Johnny Gosch is actually Jeff Gannon. Now, Jeff Gannon, if you don't know who he is, you probably don't. He was a press guy for the White House during the Bush administration, and no one had ever heard of him. It was the oddest thing. He just kind of appeared, and then he had no like journalistic experience or anything, and was one of the few that were chosen to be able to be in the White House as a press person. Check out this clip of Bill Maher questioning him.
Please welcome, we've been trying to get him here for a long time, Jeff Gannon. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bill.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the show.
Thank you for being here. there. It's a brave thing to do because I know you've had some controversy in the past. We'll get to that. I mean, your reputation was a guy who was in the press room, and people can't quite figure out why the credentials of Talon News Service, no disrespect, were enough to put you in there. It's one of the most exclusive clubs in the world, the 20 or 30 people who get to sit there and ask the leader of the free world a question directly. Why do you think you were selected for that?
Well, there's lots of people that have that opportunity from various news services. I'm a journalist, and I was able to be in the room and ask the question.
But why among the thousands of journalists did they select you? I'm just asking.
I don't know the answer to that.
You had a job formerly as an escort.
Well, there's lots of allegations out there about things in my past.
But it came out this week, the Freedom of Information request was granted, and you made 36 visits, apparently, to the White House at times when there were no press briefings going on. On 14 occasions, the Secret Service has no record of your entry and exit times. What were you doing in the White House?
Now, people think he not only looks like Johnny, which he definitely does, but Jeff Gannon, Johnny Gosch. Now, he actually had a whole other name that he went under, James Dale Guckert, but, you know, he went by Jeff Gannon for whatever reason. He was actually connected to gay escort services when they started looking into him further. So anyway, he's been like totally sketch about this whole thing. I'm gonna play some news clips where he's talking about it, and I mean, people are really mixed on this.
Johnny Gosch, he was kidnapped back in 1982. His mother, Noreen, was here to tell her side of the story.
Today we have the man who may know what happened to little Johnny. Some claim that former White House reporter Jeff Gannon may actually be the missing boy.
The internet was abuzz with word that former White House reporter Jeff Gannon may in fact be Johnny Gosch. Similar body markings and a lack of information about Gannon's early years.
I do not know if Gannon is Johnny or not. Only a DNA test would provide that information conclusively.
Let's get right to the point. Are you willing to take a DNA test and settle the controversy once and for all? Yes or no?
Absolutely, I would definitely take a DNA test, but that isn't even necessary because there's so much evidence available to disprove these accusations.
That's a yes then.
Well, he's saying yes. My friend Jeff is saying yes.
As a lawyer, I can smell a
No.
hedge.
You got to understand something. My friend here, Jeff, who's come on our show today, didn't do anybody else's show, he's going to tell us the fact. Jeff, how old are you first off?
I'm 48 years old.
48 years old. My man Johnny Gosch there would be 35 years old. Lisa,
why
the
are
numbers.
You avoiding the question?
No. He just said, hey Jeff, you said you would take a DNA. I could set this whole thing up, but let's get to the point. All we're here for is to show that my friend Jeff is not Johnny Gosch. Jeff?
There are dozens of people who have known me most of my life that could definitely vouch for the fact that I am not this person. Look, what happened to this child and the suffering that his mother has endured is a tragedy. But it's also been very difficult for me and my family, my real mother and members of my family who have had to listen to these fabrications being spread in newspapers, on television, and on the internet.
Jeff, are you willing to take a DNA test, yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes. When I cut my finger yesterday, there was plenty of DNA available. You should have stopped by.
What else you want, Lisa?
Are you his lawyer?
No, excuse me. He's my friend.
Let's hear from him. What did you think when you saw Noreen Gosch? Let him speak. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I feel that this woman is being used by people who are trying to promote themselves as being investigators when they're not. They're fabricators.
You're not always telling the truth. Your name isn't what you said it was. Then the liberal blogs come out and say that there's a different story. You resign. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but can you see that people may not know that you're telling the truth here?
There are some people who really think it is him, and then there's some who's not. Noreen seems to be kind of on the fence about it. I'm not sure what I think. But it really wouldn't surprise me. If you're gonna hide something, why not hide it in plain sight? I mean, it sounds pretty crazy, but it is possible. Although I will say that there's a good chance there's something else he's being sketchy about because he won't take a DNA test and no one knows his past, and there's all these really weird elements to him. I'm gonna link some good articles on this, but it definitely could be because he's involved in something else that he's embarrassed about or doesn't want to talk about, or he's running from something, or he has a different identity. But, Jeff Gannon denies being Johnny Gosch, and if it is Johnny Gosch, why would we force him? I mean, he obviously knows, like, he probably would want to come home if this was him, or if Johnny, wherever he is, he could be living in a mountain town somewhere. He probably wants to come home, but he knows he can't. And there's many reasons why. He knows way too much. It's a danger to his family. And it's like probably one of the craziest stories, because I can't really say, like, if you see Johnny, let people know, because I don't think he wants to come home. The whole thing is just so mind-blowing. It's such a conspiracy. There's so much to it. So please do not let this video be the end of your research on this. There are so many other great sources on it. I'm gonna leave a ton of them below. But I wanna know what you guys think. Where is Johnny Gosch now? Do you think he's Geoff Gannon? Do you think he's somewhere else? Do you think he's someone else? Do you think he's somewhere else? And where do you think he is? So super, super interesting case. I again would encourage you guys to check out the new design for Thorn. Thorn is working to fight against this exact issue, these pedophiles, and it's excellent work that they're doing. So please consider buying a shirt. It can be found in my merch shop with all of my other merch if you want to grab something else. I'm just going to end this video with some clips from Thorn about what exactly they do for those of you who don't quite now.
One of the first things that Demain Ashton did was they built a technology task force. And the whole idea is to bring the brightest minds in technology together to brainstorm around this issue.
Because of the communication that exists, because of technology and the internet, you meet a stranger that has a similar interest to you, and next thing you know, you're sharing content around that particular interest. That might happen with cars, and that might happen with hobbies, but it also happens with child pornography and human trafficking of underage children.
In 2004, when the National Center was receiving reports of potential child pornography, the volume was approximately 450,000 files. Recently, that number has expanded, and we've now received over 17 million.
Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter and Google are competing every day in business, but they've all agreed to work together to find a solution to human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children.
One of the partners we're working on with one of our programs is Polaris Project. They run the National Human Trafficking Hotline.
In this country, it is somewhat of an invisible issue, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean it isn't someone's daughter. It isn't someone's sister.
The name Thorn itself has a beautiful connotation. Thorns protect the rose, and the rose here are our children and their futures.
Nobody knows we are the same.